Dr. Tom Burns, welcome to the Rewire Virtual Series. It is such a pleasure to have you and to have another conversation together. I always enjoy our talks. So thank you for your time and for being here.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. I'm honored to be part of the series. So I look forward to our talk.
Wonderful. Well, as we were just discussing, you've had a very interesting career in multiple avenues, and you've transitioned from being a full-time practicing orthopedic surgeon. You've had time with the U.S. Olympic ski team, and now you're into real estate and finance and kind of lifestyle, and I just think that's such a neat juxtaposition to be in to help other people understand where they are in their life and how a given career can transition into really anything. And before we dive into some of the specifics of sort of lifestyle design and just overall wellness, I'd like you to share with our audience a little bit about just your background and how'd you end up where you are.
Sure, sure. And it's not as impressive a story as it sounds like. I was my dad was a Secret Service agent, moved us around the country a little bit. Been in Texas since I was about 12 years old. My life was sports when I was young, like it was for my dad before he became a cop. Uh, I got to a point where I was pretty good at what I did, but nobody was going to pay me for it to put me on TV. And so I did really well in school and decided I'd become a doctor, become an orthopedic sports medicine guy so I could hang out with athletes. So that was that big decision tree. And so I followed the plan and had a bit of a fork in the road when I was training to be an orthopedic surgeon. That's sort of when I decided maybe I might need to bring in some income from elsewhere. And so I had two parallel paths. I enjoyed orthopedic surgery and sports medicine, enjoyed it a lot. Um, I enjoyed learning about and acting on investing in what was primarily real estate and a few other things. And so I kind of grew my family, grew my knowledge, made my mistakes, and did things in a parallel path until at one point the money I was making from outside of medicine was actually greater than what I was making as an orthopedic surgeon. But I continued doing what I loved, which was orthopedics, for another 12 years. So I've pretty much just enjoyed raising my kids, traveling the world. Uh, Still like to travel the world. That's a big hot button for me. I love to see how people live. And so I really kind of hung up the scalpel just about 4 years ago because not because I was leaving something I didn't like, but because I ran out of time. So that's kind of where we are today. And I miss it a little bit and might even go back. Who knows?
That's wonderful. And you mentioned these kind of parallel knowledge tracks, and I think for certainly for people in medicine, we really don't have a lot of exposure to anything outside the medical training pipeline.
Right.
And I think that while that produces world-class experts in many cases, and Western medicine is kind of known for having a sub specialist that if you need, I don't know, you need a tendon in your hand operated on, their hand specialist for that, right?
Right.
Or if you
Right.
yeah, not just in my world, not just a general neurologist, but maybe a stroke specialist or something like that. So
Right.
what led to that parallel knowledge and what realization did you have that there was something else out there? And the lens I want to look at this through for people is that I think it's easy to get pigeonholed into our career or maybe just going through a 2 or 4 year degree and thinking that that's kind of it. And when in reality, that's really just the foundation or the launching pad to go in multiple directions and understand that people really have control over what they can learn and what they can do with a career really anywhere.
Absolutely. Wow. And yeah, we're always growing. We're always growing. And in some lives they'll say that we have to have 7 careers before we really find the one that we like. We change jobs 7 times. I don't know whose statistics those are or if they're valid, but you've always got to be open to new things because there's always somebody out there. Everybody out there knows something you don't know. You can learn something from everybody on the planet, and likewise, you can help them learn some things. And so I was always pretty open. Uh, I do sometimes jokingly call it unmedicated attention deficit. I would say yes to everything. I always wanted the new thing. In fact, I would get pretty good at something and have and then stop that and go learn something that I didn't know anything about. I liked the challenge. I enjoyed the challenge. In fact, I'm still doing that right now. Literally started playing tennis again and decided I'd change my stroke. Anyway, so I didn't know anything about investing or entrepreneurship. My dad was a government employee. He was not entrepreneurial. I didn't hang around entrepreneurs, and I got into uh, I got into my training is what happened, Ryan. And as you know, and the doctors that are listening to this, we're trained on an apprenticeship model. And so doctors that are 10, 20, 30 years older than me are kind of, in essence, showing me who I'm slated to be in 10, 20, or 30 years. And I didn't like what I saw. That was the bottom line. My wife and I decided we were going to have fun in life. These guys were not having fun. They had big houses, loud cars, uh, multiple marriages, lots of complaints about not having control of their lives, and they were working hard. So they were not happy guys. So I decided I didn't necessarily want their money if I had to have their life. So it was then that the decision was made. And I think it was, I call it touched by an angel or blind luck or, blind squirrel finding a nut. But because you can look back and say you planned it all. I feel really lucky that I had that realization. So I started looking for stuff. I looked for to be an employee. I looked to go into administration, found out I wasn't very employable. It sounded cool to wear a suit and carry a briefcase, right? Uh,
Yep.
and to keep the story short, I landed on real estate because it moves slow. You can do it with partners. You can do it part-time. It fits it fit a busy surgeon's schedule. And so I started learning about real estate and just built that one brick at a time, basically.
That's fantastic. And I think a nugget here for everybody is that you said you've always been open to new challenges and to new disciplines and to new ways of thinking about problems and doing things. And I can certainly relate to looking kind of downstream 20, 30, or maybe even 40 years at some of my professors or colleagues or mentors in medicine and thinking that that's not who I want to become. And while they were great teachers, and I'm so thankful that they were part of my life and helped shaped me, I think the example of facets of their life that I didn't want, to your point, kind of the hedonic treadmill of the luxury items and the expensive things and the fancy things that I think a lot of people think they want, but then realize that they're just strapped to these golden handcuffs where they lose control and they lose time freedom and they lose the ability to go do things that are important to them. And maybe we can spend a minute on that as you've gone through this journey of rigorous training and looking into different disciplines and maybe even being in a position to afford some of these things. But what would you say really drives happiness for you and knowing that it's probably not in the material things or what really what are the important things in life for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I always feel guilty about not saying world peace, which would be nice. But what drives Tom is my family for sure. Now that's we'll just that's just sort of a given. But I like to travel and I like to play sports, and so I think that I think sports there are so many parallels to sports in life and so many lessons in sports that I use them all the time just because I've been in sports my whole life. And then I like to travel because it is fascinating to see how the rest of the world lives. We think we know what life is like until we go travel. And so it creates perspective, it excites the mind. And if I could travel every day, I'd be thrilled if I could take my family along once in a while.
I couldn't agree more with all of that. And from a neuroplasticity perspective, the brain likes new things. And we have this kind of saying in neurology, use it or lose it. And so and that applies to muscles and everything else, I imagine. But in terms of what travel does for the brain, it exactly what you said. I mean, it's a perspective changer. It allows you to interact with different cultures, different people, different parts of the world. Gosh, I mean, we were just talking about Switzerland and Italy before we started recording here, and what a beautiful landscape that is. And I mean, my wife and I love to go over there, and that's one of our favorite places in the whole world. And you just see a different way of life, and I think again, being open to new perspectives, that really helps people understand how we're all different yet maybe the same, and how at least in those cultures, some of the more simple things in life, like enjoying a quality meal together. Hence your
Yeah.
point of family being important and relationships being important. This is really a lot of, I think, what we should be focusing on, not the external goods or the flashy things.
Right. Those flashy things, they're kind of nice, and some people really do. That is part of their motivation, but it's never that all that satisfying. And as we know, a wealthy, full-blown life is, part of those, is held up by a number of pillars. One of those is money, and there's a lot of other things, your health and your friends and family and relationships, et cetera. So yeah, it is very helpful to get some perspective. It helps you grow as a person, helps you teach your kids that it's, that they've got it pretty good, that sort of stuff. So I'm glad to know that it's good for the brain as well.
Yes, yes. And you drew a parallel between sports and life and being an avid physically active person and still going, I mean, working on your tennis game, as you said, and we were just talking about you going parasailing and being very active, and even working with the ski team. I mean, share some of those parallels for the audience about maybe the discipline or the mindset that it takes, that maybe the aspect of teamwork. I mean, I imagine there are many directions we could go with this, but what are some pearls there for people to think about in that regard?
You bet. And we can go everywhere with this because I do think, and I use sports a lot in my newsletter just because it happens. Fundamentals is one in life. You want to fundamentals in a tennis swing or a baseball swing are pretty much the same. There's fundamentals in life, saying please, saying thank you, those sort of things. And the fundamentals of business are pretty simple. 1 + 1 always equals 2, and doing your diligence, things like so. Sticking with the fundamentals and not taking the big swing usually gets you farther on a compounding basis and on over a long term.
Hmm.
The discipline, as you mentioned, the discipline to practice. What is it that Bear Bryant says? Everybody has the will to win, not everybody has the will to prepare to win. And it's a really good quote to, discipline and practice. That means reading and understanding. You're, trying to be the best neurologist possible or the best orthopedic surgeon or learning, or watching YouTube videos on how to hit the best tennis stroke. So that type of work really does pay off. Teamwork for sure. Uh, and mistakes, people, Michael Jordan, missed 9,000 shots. Roger Federer only won 53% of the points when he was playing tennis, but he's won the most game of anybody. So you're not going to win every time. We learn from our mistakes or our defeats. Defeats are not permanent. They're not they're an event. They're not an identity. And so the best athletes learn how to forget the last point, the last play, etc. So I can keep going, so I think I better stop here.
No, this is gold. So I think we do a real disservice in our formal education system and certainly at least in the medical training pipeline, as I experienced, to not encourage more mistakes. And we strive for making straight A's, and again, it takes discipline to make that level of grade. But in the real world, life's a team sport. We all are going to stumble and fail, and I think we're conditioned from an early age that that is not the best path, or that that's shameful, or that you're punished with an inappropriate grade or a lower grade or something like that. And I really think it creates this artificial um, uh, mindset there, or an unrealistic mindset that I think really does a detriment to progress in individuals.
I totally agree. In the business world, collaboration and teams are how you create success. In our doctor world, collaboration is called cheating. So we are applauded for getting the right answer. We are not for getting the wrong one. And some people are really good at getting the right answer and doing the right thing. And life is filled with little defeats. And so I think, as you said, the mindset for somebody that has always, air quote, had the right answer, when things go poorly, which they inevitably do outside of academia, it's hard for them to take it. And they're maybe not as well-rounded. We are going to make mistakes, and that's how we learn.
Couldn't agree more. I think that is such an important lesson for everybody to understand and embrace that it not only is it okay to make a mistake, but that's a fundamental part of learning. And one of my favorite iterations of this is from Ray Dalio, where he talks about his sort of arc of performing and then failing and then learning from the mistake and then reiterating to improve and to kind of he's on this upward, he sort of draws this as an upward trajectory or cycle or constantly improving loop of just a series of failures. That if you
Right.
didn't have the courage or the understanding to pursue, that you'd never experience that growth because that's just the way the human mind works.
Yeah, they used one somebody's quote from somewhere said the guy on top of the mountain is the guy that's made the most mistakes.
That's beautifully said. Beautifully said. And then you also mentioned fundamentals and bringing up just saying please, saying thank you, having manners, and maybe even perhaps living from a place of gratitude.
Right.
And I mean, there's actually data behind this where they've studied older. It was actually a study of older nurses is the one I'm familiar with, where women with self-reported levels of gratitude had actually a 9% decreased all-cause mortality and they actually live longer. And when you think about this, the lowered chronic stress in the body, the lowered levels of cortisol that impact blood pressure and even perhaps insulin resistance. I mean, you can correlate these things, albeit maybe it's a stretch. But gratitude is it's just so fundamentally important. So I'm glad that you brought that up. But just curious of any thoughts there.
Yeah, and I use it, I'll quote my son who, we all look, things don't go perfect, right? I mean, there is the Facebook post, but then there's all the mistakes and the ugliness behind it. And so, sometimes I'll have something going on, or my son will mention, and he, of course, calls it a first world problem, right? And so, I've taken a chapter from my friend Hal Elrod's book and his teaching on the miracle morning, and I do the journaling. And I finish with another mentor who suggested just three little simple things, just three things of gratitude, three statements of gratitude. And it could be, I woke up today, or or my allergies aren't bad, or I won this, or whatever, just small things, or my son is happy, small little bits of it really does change things. And there is always somebody worse off than you. There's always somebody better off than you. And we shouldn't be comparing anyway, but we should be grateful for what we have. And I say that not as a teacher trying to get people to listen to that. I kind of have to say that to myself all the time, is that need to be really grateful for what we have. We know where our next meal's coming from. Nobody's shooting at us. Nobody's cutting our hands off because of how we worship. So we're pretty lucky, most all of us listening to this.
Couldn't agree more. And a step further on gratitude, it's not just you, Tom. It's everybody. I mean, it's such an imperative part of our day that I hope everybody listening to this is able to understand why part of why gratitude is so important. And this really, for me, stems from part of the way that our brain's actually wired. We have this thing called a negativity bias, and you may have heard of this, but for those that haven't, our brain generates about 70,000 thoughts a day, which is just an impressive number to me to even contemplate. But 80% of those by default are negative thoughts. And you might think, why in the world would that be? Or why are our thoughts so negative all the time? And when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, it was to keep us safe. And the way that I think about this is if, a hunter-gatherer caveman was coming up on a ridge or something and he saw a silhouette that looked maybe like a lion in the distance, he would be safe to assume that that's a dangerous object. I shouldn't go over there. I'll go take shelter on higher ground or in a cave or wherever, even if he woke up the next morning and found out it was a rock or something, right? So that negativity bias served us a purpose once upon a time. But now in the world of Zoom and Office and investments and teams and whatever your work environment is, that could be a something as simple as an email that we open that our mind perceives or changes the meaning of, and we automatically assume the worst. And it's it doesn't only hinder your quality of life and perhaps your relationships or how you feel in the moment, but this really can become detrimental to your health long term. And the reason I go through all of that is that the antidote is gratitude.
Ah,
And if people take the time to do exactly what you're saying, Tom, and just, I mean, even if it's just three items a day, whether it's at the beginning of the day to sort of frame the day or as a reflection towards the end of the day, as you're journaling. I mean, that just has such a massive perspective change, and quite literally in very short order, it allows your brain to rewire and changes your frame of reference and allows you to approach life from a place of thankfulness, which again keeps you more open-minded, keeps you more grounded, keeps you more open to new ideas, and less in a reactive and stress-based state, which is I think a very powerful thing for people to understand.
Wow, that's really helpful. I didn't know, uh, yeah, because you do feel kind of good. You feel kind of good when you do. You think, you know what? Life isn't quite so bad. My life is okay. I do another exercise at the beginning of every year where it's the I got this from another mentor where you just write down on January 1st, you write down 20 good things that happened the year before. And that list tends to grow to 40, 50, 60 if you're once you really get into it. And it's a good start for the year.
Yes, there's a yeah, kind of a version of this I sort of have done on steroids that was at I guess this was 2 Decembers ago, but my friend Ryan Pearson challenged me to this, and he said, yeah, I've learned about this gratitude challenge where it's 10 days, but rather than 3 items, it's 25 items. And so you think, oh, this will be easy, and you sit down and you go through the first few, but if you've never done this, coming up with 25 items that you're thankful for can actually be quite a challenge for your brain.
Right.
And day one, you get through and you go, all right, I think I got all those down. Well, day two, you can't reuse any of the same items. It has to be a new 25. And day two, you're like, oh my gosh, like there can't be 25 other things. I've already written down my dogs, one dog, two dog, my wife, my my shelter, whatever the basics are, right? But then the funniest thing happens by the time you get halfway through and certainly towards the end, your brain already is starting to undergo this state change where, you're just, man, I'm thankful for the fresh air outside and shoes on my feet. And like you said, no one's shooting at us. And we just have such a great life for so many reasons. And it becomes automatic. And if you can really stay in that state and cultivate that mindset, again, that doesn't, they say the average habit takes, I don't know, 60 or so days to form rather. Doesn't have to be that long. That can be actually quite quick with a more rapid transformation, and then that can stick and have massive impacts for your health and your wellness. So
Wow, that's interesting. That's pretty cool.
yes. Now, in addition to gratitude, and these two go together in terms of overall physical health, but maintaining an active lifestyle is such an imperative part of an integrated and intentional healthy life, and that is clearly something that you've prioritized over the years. So for our audience and for our listeners, can you share some of the things that are either non-negotiable for you every day or things that you like to do? I mean, you mentioned parasailing and tennis, but what do you like to do to stay moving?
Everything. My wife will even let me skydive now. I just I started, back in my fellowship days in the gym. So in the gym at least 3 times a week. That's not a lot because I do other things in between. Here now I'll do the gym 3 days a week, and then the in between days I'm hiking in the woods. I'm a big fan of walking in the woods, and so I'll do 3 or 4 miles, or I'll do 12 or 15 if I'm training for some longer thing. I do like to climb mountains. I picked up tennis again after being off for about 30 to 35 years. So last 2.5 years has been, it's been pretty good. A lot of lean muscle mass coming back, and I'm feeling pretty good there. So, uh, I'll do anything somebody puts in front of me. But those are the main things right now. I do the gym work to stay in shape, keep the core in shape, work on a little bit of aerobic stuff, and keep the muscle mass going. And the tennis is just fun. So, and that puts me even better shape.
There's some interesting data that looked at people who played racket sports relative to those that were active in other disciplines. And there seems to be a slight increase in longevity or lifespan in those people. And I find this interesting because of all the domains that racket sports involve. So it's physically active, clearly, and you've got enough muscle activation from kind of the starting and stopping. There's an element of sprinting, of course, that loads the muscles and loads the bones. So there's healthy metabolic and physiologic changes there. There's a cardiorespiratory component. So, to rather than just sit on a stationary bike or something, which by the way is great for people if they can tolerate it. So, but there's a cardio component. Two, three, it's social. So it involves relationships, and you're talking to people as whether it's with a spouse or friends, and perhaps you're going to dine afterwards, or just be social in between sets or games. And then the neat one, I think, in terms of neuroplasticity is the visuospatial and the planning component. And while you're, I don't know, on a bench press or like I said, on a stationary cardiovascular machine, you don't have to think as much about what you're doing. So you're tracking a ball, and you're using multiple brain circuits to analyze a fairly rapid and complex series of events to coordinate when, where are you going to serve, or where are you going to volley or respond, and where's the ball going? How are you going to react to this? So there's a lot of planning and strategy that utilizes multiple, really motor and planning circuits in the brain. That again, back to that use it or lose it concept, enhances neuroplasticity on multiple fronts. So very interesting stuff.
And it's interesting. So I was an orthopedic surgeon, right? And because I had been a tennis player 3 decades before, I got all the tennis players here in Austin, Texas. And so they were they stuck out. The tennis players were probably the healthiest people that I took care of. I mean, I would take care of 75, 70, 75, 80-year-old tennis players, lean muscle mass, tan, which is not so the dermatologists don't like that, but they were in great shape, happy, competitive, and looking forward to the next time they got out. So maybe there is something to it, because I certainly noticed a long time ago.
That's an interesting observation, and that's certainly in line with the data. I've not had as many, I guess, direct tennis athletes. Again, and not in my nature to see as healthy people usually. My time in the military, I suppose, I was working more with healthy Marines and
Right.
sailors. These are younger people, not older people. But again, this comes back to this idea of maintaining our whatever our baseline performance is. And you could speak to this much more than I could, but it always surprised me to know that our bone mineral density peaks in our early 20s. I don't know if I've heard different numbers, but 22 to 25, somewhere around there. I mean, I would, but before medical school, I would just assume that, this would be I don't know, maybe mid 50s, or maybe, around menopause in women, but it is not the case at all. I mean,
Right.
you have to build that early and maintain it. And
Right.
maybe you could speak to that, or maybe the risk of fractures in an older person if they
Oh,
don't.
absolutely. Absolutely. That and men's testosterone, that all starts happening in the 20s, 30s. Everything starts that curve down, right? And so um yeah, if the there is this understandable gap in people's fitness levels, because we come out of college, hopefully we're doing something in college, and then we start making our lives, right? And so first it's either working 80 hours a week at the investment bank, or as a doctor, or pick the job. Then you get married and you're raising the kids. And so there's always this 10, 15 year, could even be longer gap where mom and dad both don't don't get out and try to take care of themselves because they're taking care of the kids or life. Um, I would submit that carving out some time for themselves is better for their kids, because it'll keep them around longer for their kids, etc. And as you mentioned, Wolf's Law, bone is laid down in response to stress. So we want weighted exercise. You don't want to swim all the time. You don't want to just bicycle. A little bit of impact, or at least a little bit of weighted exercise against gravity, is going to help put the stress to those bones and keep them strong. Because, as you mentioned, as we get older, uh, as our bone density decreases, small falls can cause big fractures. And the data on hip fractures and wrist fractures and things like that, it's certainly there's morbidity, which is how they have to heal from those things, but it does have an effect on mortality, which is how long you live. So you want to not have those fractures. You want to be healthy. It's really easy to maintain with simple stuff, just like taking a little walk once in a while. 20-minute walk a day is helpful, and 20 minutes on a cardio machine is helpful as well. You can expand from there, but a little bit of something like that, and you're better than the majority of the population that's not doing anything.
Couldn't agree more. I think the last stat that I read on this, the vast majority of Americans don't even hit kind of the basic minimum recommendations of just that 20 minutes of cardio that you mentioned 3 or 4 times a week or any kind of physical activity. And I really think that our culture has done a disservice to how we're designed to optimally function. And that gets into the goodness, I mean, how we're feeling, the gratitude component. We're constantly just overwhelmed with digital technology. I mean, here we are in different states talking through a Zoom
Yeah.
call in artificial light, but the pace of life, most people wake up and they get in a car and they commute to work, whether that's 20, 30 minutes, an hour or more. So they're sitting, they get to work, they sit at a desk for 8 or 10 hours or more. They sit on their commute on the way home. And then, maybe they get to enjoy a little time with family in the evenings, sitting at a dinner table before they sit and watch TV, before they sleep for 8 hours and go to bed,
Yep.
and they do that for 30 or 40 years. So I mean, movement. I cannot stress the importance enough for everybody how imperative movement is for you, because it's just how we're designed. I mean, you said it. I mean, if you're a living example of this, but looking at these athletes and in particular tennis players that have continued to move and maintain that function, that level of activity, people clearly stay healthy for longer.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I mean, it's mental and physical health, and you mentioned the mental part, and you just look, and you've mentioned Europe a few times. If you, and I don't want to bash us, but our lifestyle is easy, somewhat, and we do what you said. We drive everywhere. We could drive to the grocery store to pick up what we need, and we've got busy lives. And but over you watch sometimes in certain areas in Europe or just certain places where they will walk to work, they'll walk to home, they'll pick up that fresh baked loaf of bread each day, things like that. And the reason I'm not saying that's better than what we do. The correlation I'm making is that you don't see as much obesity over there as you might see here. And I'm not the first one to say that. Everybody says that. And so I believe we've gotten our portions are big. We've gotten a little soft. I remember we have work and stress always on us. I remember back in the day, I actually started my practice. I did not have a cell phone, and computers were barely being invented. So I actually came home and there was my kids or a TV. So gee, I got to play with the kids. So we have to be extra diligent these days to put the electronics home, to do some movement, spend some time with the family, because that'll also set an example for those kids that you're raising to be moving. You want them to be somebody that moves so they can live a long, happy life, because you're going to teach them how to live beyond 100 because of the things that we can do and the technology we have now.
That's beautifully said. And I agree with you. I mean, my wife and I love going to the Amalfi Coast in Italy in particular. It's just one area that we love, and a little town called Ravello that's up on the mountaintop. And the first time we stayed there, we stayed on a lemon farm, and you get to wake up every day with a nice breeze looking at the Mediterranean to people farming lemons all around you. It's just a beautiful experience. But I could not believe how in shape these people were that were even into their 70s. I mean, we're both very intentional about movement and about lifting and cardio and all these things. And I mean, I mean, there's some steep steps on the coast of Italy, and these guys are zipping up and down, carrying buckets of lemons. And I walk 15 or 20 steps, winded, going, my goodness, I need to really think about adding some elevation to my training. So to your point, though, I mean, nobody's really overweight. They're eating minimally processed food. There's the sense of community and dining together, as you mentioned, which you can have with your family and your kids when you get home. So
Yeah.
I think there's some profound lessons there. Like you said, not to beat up American culture, but some very, very important lessons, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and to maybe segue from that on kids and teaching your children important lessons. I think purpose and legacy are very important concepts. And so, I guess what legacy do you hope to leave for the world, or implement to your kids, or teach people, or how would you encourage people to frame that or think about that?
Right. And I've not actually been one to think a lot about legacy. I figure when I'm gone, I'm gone. Hopefully they'll say good things. But as part of the legacy, I want to leave kids that are self-sufficient, good-hearted people not naive like dad may have been a few times. We have made mistakes, so I'm trying to teach him those things. And my kids are adult, by the way. They're both well over 30, uh, which ages me. But um, so far, the evidence shows that I've done okay. And, I did find through all those years that, I have a lot of friends that are really good at teaching their kids the value of money and how to, and really awesome parents. And I didn't know any of that stuff when I was coming up. I do all this money stuff. I didn't teach my kids, don't know any of it. But, I always supported and made sure they had options to look at. Uh, and they have, and anyway, that I don't want to go be bragging on kids. I want them to I want them to have good lives. I want them to impact the world. And that's what I try to do the same. I try to help as many people as possible, because that does multiply over time. So I think I would be happy if my kids were happy, healthy, and had enough time to go out there and do some good in the world, whatever that might entail.
Beautiful. One lesson that has come back to me in more ways than one is that we sometimes never know how even a small gesture can impact another person. And I've had this happen more than once where I've just said something in passing to somebody that months or even years later, I've run into that person or gotten a message from them that said, "Hey, you really changed my life with this small piece of information that you gave me, or just demonstrating that you cared, or that you saw me when nobody else did or would." And I mean that really brings me to tears when I when I encounter these situations
Right.
because it's such a beautiful reminder that we really that this needs to be our operating system, our operating point with people and how we face the world and just back to legacy, I don't think about legacy as necessarily what's left when we're gone, because I think that's the way that a lot of people frame it. But it's a result of a lifetime of actions and whatever you create or whatever you do. And if it's a result of a lifetime of actions, your legacy is what you're living, breathing, and doing every day.
Right.
Right? It's how you show up for the world. It's how you show up for your children. It's the lessons you impart. So for you to say, Tom, that you want to raise children that create this impact in the world, I think that's one of the most important things for people to understand and embody, because we're all here to help and we're all here to elevate each other. And if we're in a position to be able to do that and hopefully in some way at scale, whether it's through a virtual series like this where people can just absorb it and hopefully take something useful out of it, or to go travel or work with athletes or whatever it is. I think there's so many opportunities for people to get involved and just help change other people's lives for the better.
Yeah, and you make a really good point. You bring up the fact that we never know who's watching or who's listening. Uh, on a micro, the kids, now that they're this old, they'll say, "Well, you used to always do this, or you used to always do that," and you would say this. They watch what you do, not necessarily what you say. But on a more macro scale, yeah, you'll run into somebody that says, that I see that you do this consistently, and that's really helped me, or this one thing you said has really helped me. So I really love the way you frame it. It's the way we live consistently. When that person over there is going to say, Ryan is this kind of guy because he's consistent. He does this all the time and he cares. And you want the world to know that you do care and that you're always willing to help, because there's always somebody out there. Our hope would be there's always somebody out there that's willing to help us as well.
That's exactly right. And we've already touched on a lot of these points with respect to what your purpose is. Clearly, that's raising kids to be a force for good in the world and travel and any number of things. But if you had to pick a purpose or something that gets you out of bed every day at this stage in life, what do you think that thing would be?
Um, ooh, uh, I like helping people with questions. People, if I've been somewhere that somebody wants to go, I actually, you really enjoy, right? You enjoy helping people. That is fun. Uh, what else? I do have a little bit of a thing. I'm not a big fan of food insecurity, particularly in the childhood area. So I've kind of helped with some things like that. Not in a big way, but those are kind of the things I just always values are adventure, connection, and growth. So, adventure we talked about, that's traveling. Growth, we're always trying to get better. So, part of what gets me up is I figure I might meet somebody new today and start a new relationship. You never know.
That's fantastic. I've made a habit of asking my older patients, when I say older, I mean we're talking, 90s and above that have made it in good health, how'd you get here? Or, how did you maintain such good health? And I get some really funny answers, but perhaps the most consistent answer that I've had is the desire or the cultivating the ability to wake up with a purpose every day. And I just think that's so important for people to have. And I think a lot of people end up trapped, maybe in a job or in a circumstance or a situation where they feel like it's a means to an end. And back to our commuter that wakes up and goes and sits at a day job or a desk and comes back and maybe mindless sleep escapes to binging Netflix or scrolling Instagram or whatever. And not that those things aren't necessary sometimes to decompress or get our mind off stressful things, but in general, I think a lot of people can feel stuck and that they don't have direction and they don't have purpose. And I think that cultivating that sense is important, not just for now, for again, quality of life and for being able to bring your best self forward, but really the data support people that live into older age and to live well when they wake up with something greater that motivates them outside themselves, like adventure, connection, having meaning. I think this is really important for people to know and understand.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the better longevity hacks. You have to have something to get you out of bed. Uh, you got to have something to go do. There's nothing worse than that empty, I don't know what to do today feeling. And so, purpose can be small. It can be, I'm going to get up and go read to those kids at the library today. I'm a volunteer, or I'm going to go greet people at Walmart, or I always claim that I'm going to die with a deal going on. Or a trip that I'm planning, so yeah, I think it's not that hard to find a little bit of purpose, and it keeps us going. It pulls you out of bed rather than making you want to curl up and stay in there, and that leads to depression, and that leads to shorter lives.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Now, we touched on mistakes that we've all made and how important mistakes are, but are there any lessons that you could impart regarding personal mistakes or struggles or maybe growing pains, anything in that arena that
Ooh.
you'd care to share?
Well, we should have started at the beginning of the hour. I could have started the list of mistakes. I have. And I joke, but it's actually true. We make a lot of mistakes. We learn a lot of things. I uh I really as we were talking about kids, I wish I would have kind of sat my kids down and taught them a little bit more about money. They're both kind of scared of it, and they're my kids. People were like, "Hey, you've got this resource. Why don't you learn this?" But they weren't ready, and I wasn't a pusher. I would never push them into a sport or, a job, and now they're both going to be doctors. It's not my fault. Um, but I kind of wish maybe they knew a little bit more. And then some of my business mistakes have pretty much been in the trust realm, you know. I'm used to shaking hands and expecting that person will say what they do and do what they say, and that's happened a lot of times. But in this day and age, we find out that people don't necessarily live by that mantra, and that has caused me some anguish and pain. And so, but what it's done is it's made me a due diligence machine, and it's helped me teach others how to avoid, getting their money taken from them, and how to know when they're investing with a good group. So, uh, I've bought pieces of real estate I shouldn't have. I've not read contracts more detailed enough, et cetera, et cetera. And so all those things have rolled up to where, I'm starting to learn a little bit about what I'm doing now.
I'd say so. I think your record speaks for itself on that front. But what I'm hearing is cultivating a sense of discernment and judgment through experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. And there's just no, I mean, it doesn't matter how many textbooks you read. I'm sure you would agree with this, but there's no substitute for experience. I mean, you can read every book in the world on how to replace a femur, I suppose. But till you do it and you put your hands on somebody, there's no substitute, right, for the actual lived experience. And
Right.
so we can read books on finance and we can have training, but till you really are in it and go through it, as an example of what you do now in your day job, so to speak. I think that's very important to understand that again, it takes time to learn these things, and to not be afraid of the mistakes, as you said earlier, but to just reframe that as a learning experience that we're all going to go through.
That's the key. You just said the key there because we will make mistakes. It's inevitable. It's just that, we make probably thousands of them a day. We trip a little bit walking down the street, we learn to recover. But you said the operative word is to reframe it. And we can, and I've heard somebody speak before that your past can be whatever you want it to be. You can reframe that past. You can tell that story of that past incident, whether it be good or bad, in your own way. And so we have the ability to reframe everything that's happened, good or bad, and turn them into lessons and frame them in a manner that they are positive for us. And the other thing you mentioned is that you kind of got to get in the game. You can learn a lot of lessons by studying and preparing, but the intensity of the lesson increases exponentially once you're actually in the game. There's an old story about a guy who had a pocket full of money and another guy who had some experience. The two met, and before the meeting was over, the guy with the experience had the money, and the guy with the money had some new experience. So,
Classic parable.
yeah, exactly. And so, but that really does happen. But that'll happen to you once, and you'll learn. And so that's why we suggest to people that if you're going into something new, do your best to do the diligence. And that's sort of a whole separate subject. But uh, if it's a new test small because the size of the lesson is going to be the same every time. So buy that lesson at a discount. Don't put as much in. Don't go all in. Learn first. Don't let fear of missing out have you put too much in on the first time. You've got to be prudent. And so those are lessons from a guy who's not necessarily been prudent the whole time through his career.
And it's easier to stand on the shoulders of giants, certainly, and to use the lessons of those that come before us, and that's why writing books and certainly sharing information with people are so helpful. And this whole idea of lesson learning and reframing, to get back to this concept of rewiring our brains, that's quite literally what's happening on a neuroplastic or a neurochemical level, is that your neurons are actually reshaping themselves to change your behavior or modify your behavior in a given direction, whether that increases your probability of success in the future, ideally if you're reframing in the correct direction, or perhaps maybe taking one or two or three extra times to reframe and rewire to get you back to where you need to be. And there's no right or wrong answer here, but certainly the more efficiently and the more open-minded you can be to get there, I think will be helpful and help people elevate sooner.
Well, I just got so good at making mistakes that I had plenty of them to choose from. So,
Certainly makes it easy. It's painful, but
oh yeah, I tell you.
and to your point about getting in the game and the real thing being more intense than theory, I mean that's I think most of us again that go through training and that go through a career, or go through training to set us up for a career rather, when we're learning, whether that's again, like I said, a 2-year degree or 4-year degree, whether you go to medical school or some graduate program, that's a very intense period of learning. But once we're through whatever that training is and we're settled into a career, I think it's very easy to get comfortable in whatever our baseline skill set is. And we can add knowledge, sure. I mean, there, maybe new data or information that come out, or best practices, or continuing education, but that's really adding to a foundation that you've built. And I think it's also important for people to know, and again, you're a prime example of this, of always staying curious and reinventing yourself, because that leads to outsized success. At least that's been my experience. When people can learn about different industries and start to see the bridges between them and see ideas and problems from different angles, that's really when I've observed people just have massive success in life, and read about people throughout history that have done so. So I just, if you want to speak to that, or if you've had any parallels, I mean, clearly you have between.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I've been open to a lot. I've said yes to too many things. I've sold lighters nationally. I've done all kinds of weird stuff. So not everything worked, but again, pulled lessons. So So the the ability, or not the ability, the urge, I always want to do new stuff. The urge to find out what's it really like to drive that car really fast, or what's it really like to climb that mountain, or I wonder if I could sell that thing. That kind of looks like a fun industry that I know nothing about. It has taught me a lot of lessons. I've met some cool people. I've hit lots of dead ends. So I'm like the little rat running through the maze. I bumped my nose a lot against, blank walls, but it's, might I have focused on one or two things? Maybe so, but I can tell you people always ask, do you have any regrets or would you do anything different? No, the answer is really no, because it brought me to where I am right now. I'm happy. I've got a wonderful family, and there's no telling which way those things would have forked and what multiverse I would have been in if I'd have changed it. So I'm quite thrilled with all my good and bad decisions. And I think those decisions, whether good or bad, they'll shape who you are, and we'll learn something from all of them.
Yes, I think that's perfectly said. And to add to that, you mentioned just this the trait that you have of curiosity, of always being open to how different things work or new disciplines. I read Walter Isaacson's biography of Leonardo da Vinci a couple years ago, and Da Vinci being the original Renaissance man, I think was where that term comes from. But the innate curiosity of Leonardo da Vinci is a central theme of the book that fascinated Isaacson. And whether it was painting, clearly with something like the Mona Lisa that he worked on literally till he died, to the first flying machine, to exhuming or digging up corpses to study the anatomy. And there was an example in the book, I believe, that was he had a note to himself to describe the tongue of a woodpecker. And I mean, who thinks of that? I mean, this the level of curiosity of someone like this that again lived at a time where we didn't have all the distractions that we do, and maybe the pace of life, and one could be a little more methodical and dedicate more time to learning about specific disciplines, but they're timeless lessons there. So I think being curious is a very important trait that again helps people understand new disciplines, rewire their brain, and be open to new endeavors.
Absolutely. And boy, it's easy to be curious now. We've got, search engines. Leonardo didn't necessarily have a search engine. He hadn't built it yet. So, but yeah, I mean, you can go crazy and do too much, as many of my doctor friends would say, hey, everything in moderation, but uh, it's a fun game. It's a fun adventure to go on when you're trying out new things. You never know what you'll find. It's that box of chocolates, right? You never know what you're going to get.
Exactly right. Yeah. Forrest Gump, timeless lessons. Um, well, Tom, as we're coming to a close here, I want to give you an opportunity to do a few things. One, if there are any parting thoughts that you have for our audience, any just we've covered so much, and this has just been a gold mine for me. I've got a whole page full of notes here that I'm going to review, certainly. But anything you want to share with people, first off, any closing thoughts or remarks, and equally importantly, where can people learn more about you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, whenever you see someone like me or somebody on stage, typically you'll get the Facebook post, which is all the good things. Pretty much know that somebody that really does have some good success has a lot of things that have gone wrong. Some of them are pretty dark. Some of them are just a little bit dark, but they've learned some lessons and they've persevered through them. And that's the best investment hack I've ever found is time and persistence. It's the guy that doesn't give up and just refuses to quit, that guy or gal that eventually wins in the end. So I wish everybody the life that they're searching for. Just don't quit. Hang in there. And to get a hold of me, I've got a website. It's richdoctor.com. And if you want to send me an email, it's hello@richdoctor.com. And my website's really just kind of loaded with a whole bunch of free things that people can use. There's a lot of resources that are there for folks that are trying to create a little control of their time, a little passive income. That's kind of my gig. I like passive income that comes in whether I'm sleeping, vacationing, or talking to Ryan. So that's about it.
Dr. Tom Burns, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Ryan.